All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Financier. We're streaming live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Definitely let us know where you're coming in from. We have a special guest today, Dr. Mukesh Patel. He's a director of innovation at Rutgers. We'll learn about his story going from becoming a lawyer all the way to becoming a startup entrepreneur, having multiple streams of success, and now a professor of innovation. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome Dr. Mukesh Patel. How are we doing?
Hi, Vijay. How are you? Mukesh, please.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the latest and greatest on your end? You've seen a lot. You know, we're members of TIE New Jersey, so it's been a while since we've met in person. But the world has changed from March 2020 to March 21. What's the latest on your side?
Yeah, so much has changed. So currently in the field of education, it seems that the consensus across strategists and innovation experts and education experts is that 10 years of natural evolution in terms of innovation and technology and methodologies or processes was compressed into 10 months. And there's a lot of students that are struggling, and families and parents that are completely struggling around the world, and even here domestically in the US. At the same time, there are students across the world taking advantage of new opportunities, new methodologies of learning, and technology platforms to advance their education and careers in material significant ways.
I think that's a good point. The changes from internet connection, accessing online learning is really different. So why don't we take a step back? Talk about how you got into law and then moved into the world of business and entrepreneurship. Why did you go into studying legal, and how did that prepare you for your journey, which we'll go into, and how is that different from what's happening today?
Sure, yeah. So going to college many years ago, I was thinking med school, that's going to be the path. And then I wanted something different. I wanted something a little bit more non-traditional and a little bit that would test a variety of different opportunities. And so decided to actually study econometrics. That's statistical modeling applied in economic problem solving and financial problem solving. And then from there, I decided to expand as an expert generalist, like really think about connecting the dots with different disciplines that normally would not be connected. And so I wanted to expand. So I did a secondary in computer science, and then another secondary, or as we call minor, in cinematic arts and technology, filmmaking, producing, directing, on the original like 35 millimeter film, which now, it's all digital, well, mostly digital, etc. And then from there, started my career doing econometric modeling and even learning coding from a corporate institutional perspective. So at AT&T, worked at LexisNexis, Westlaw, for a global insurance company for a short while, and realized that, okay, that was great, but I wanted more. I wanted, again, something a little unique or different. In the history of our family, we never had any attorneys. And one of the best professors I had in college was a Harvard law professor who had come and taught at Rutgers University, and took his course, one of the most challenging, thought-provoking courses. And he actually recommended, have you thought about a law degree? And so put away the GMATs, picked up the LSATs, and went to Fordham Law School at Lincoln Center, New York, and the rest is history. Being in Lincoln Center was an amazing experience, because that's where kind of the creativity, the arts, intersected with law and technology. And so, and this was around pre-internet, right? And going into when the internet was kind of just coming to age. So being in New York at that time was fantastic. And spent a number of years, maybe a decade or more, representing founders and C-suite executives of emerging growth companies. And that's when I got to really appreciate their lens, their perspectives on things. And then I realized I like to be on the other side of my desk, not the one reviewing and negotiating, but the one building, creating, and taking risk.
So to do a full circle, before we go into that career of taking risk, do you think you would have been you would have studied law today if you were doing this? Would you have taken the same exact approach?
Today, possibly, I think a law degree was extremely valuable and instrumental in shaping different perspectives of how to think, and how to analyze problems and how to come up with solutions. But so yes, the answer is yes, I would have gotten a law degree, but perhaps years later, not straight, essentially straight out of school, gotten maybe 4 or 5 years experience, maybe combined it with another degree, perhaps a DBA, Doctor of Business Administration, or PhD, or Master's, or MBA, some other combination. But one thing I would definitely change is I would not have practiced law for as long as I did. There's something called the accelerated learning curve, and the inflection point typically comes 2 or 3 years into learning any new area of discipline. And that's when I would have kind of done some curve shifting at that point rather than go much further in hindsight.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So where did you start off first? Where was the first venture? What was the first risk you took?
Yeah, so after kind of practicing law and building those kind of skills, I started with my first startup company was when I was actually in high school. And I saw an opportunity to sell a product through the students in the school store to create more revenue and profit share with the student organizations than what other incumbent institutional companies were doing. And so that was a great journey. And then all through high school and college, I had the benefit of growing up in a household that was like a startup incubator, small business incubator. My parents, first generation into the US, were essentially the ones responsible for bringing the rest of the family over and coming here with humbled beginnings. And I don't think we ever had less than 13 to 15 people living in our house. And then we expanded to a 3-family house, but it was an incubator. It was like families moved in. We helped them create a business or find a business, invest in a business, launch a company, and then they would kind of move out. They would graduate from the accelerator program, essentially. And that's something that I realized later that my dad was kind of building. He was an electrical engineer by day and an entrepreneur by night. So that kind of was a big influence. And then working with a lot of founders for over a decade was another influence. And I was always passionate in building and creating. And so I was buying and ripping open computers and coding before, coding at the age of like 14, in the early to mid 80s. Around the mid 80s.
What program did you start with?
Oh, everything from like advanced basic to Fortran to Pascal to a little bit of those like early. But I recently just took a Python course.
Yeah.
And the fundamentals have not changed.
Yep. No, it's all the same. Yeah.
First principles are still the same. Of course, there's more technology, more opportunities, more reach and impact and feature sets. But the conceptual frameworks are fundamentally pretty similar, but now with bigger, faster, better, right?
Yep.
Think about cognitive computing, advanced computing, quantum computing, and leveraging all of that, the internet, social media, et cetera. But going back, so started my first business there, and then we had a number of family businesses. So weekends and evenings, always at the board table, at the dinner table. I became a franchisee while I was in /grad school of companies, and started investing towards my senior year of college in both public and private kind of ventures. And then over the years, had an opportunity to be a co-founder in about 10 different companies in 6 different industries. And that led me to then focus on the investing side because I wanted yet another perspective, another experience.
So that's a great way to do it. One, we'll quickly mention programming, I think, is fundamental for people to learn today. I started with Visual Basics, obviously Java, PHP, anything you want to pick up. It's funny, someone mentioned it to me this morning that the Mac 2, you could buy it online, like on eBay, pretty well conditioned for like $200-$300, because but it's so valuable because everybody learned how to use, the computer on those original machines, that it's going to increase in value. So that's original stuff is still so valuable today, and so are the original programs. But go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say that I think for the next generation, especially for parents out there who might be listening, or even for students, it doesn't matter if you want to go into that space or not. It's just like learning a framework of thinking, of logical, analytical thinking and problem solving. Right. It's helpful. And you don't need to become a software developer or an app developer or a computer scientist or even a data scientist, but it's helpful to learn those disciplines, just like you learn other traditional courses like, history or language arts or social sciences or music or theory, anything, the maths, the sciences. So it is helpful. Like kids as young as like third, fourth, fifth grade can start learning fundamental concepts of thinking all the way to grad students. If nothing else, at least to understand what is the potential of that innovation or technology across disciplines.
Right. And to go hand in hand with that, law is just as important, because a lot of these startups are spending quite a bit of money on legal frameworks, either financing, doing buy-sell agreements or raising capital, whatever it may be, or acquisitions. So it's a good transition. You got a lot. Most important thing is you got a lot of reps in. Become co-founders. You did a lot of experience learning from day one. So do you want to talk about maybe one or two of those either successes or failures as those 10 businesses you helped run? What worked, what didn't, and then maybe we'll move into the juice tank story, because that's pretty interesting for New Jersey ecosystem.
Yeah. So one of the businesses that when I started in high school, and then my parents kind of helped evolve it as a small business, and then we had multiple locations, was a consumer product distribution business. And we, as a family business, started with over 2,000 SKUs of products, and then eventually cut it down and specialized in a particular sector. But then that became expanded into integrations of manufacturing and importing and et cetera. And I was always early, looking at like what's 5-10 years ahead. And I would often be shut out of conversations because it's like, this idea is too crazy. At one point I was like, we need to automate everything. And I ended up working with a friend of mine who was a computer scientist to actually develop software systems to help run the business. And of course, in the beginning, everyone, and I did this at the law firm I worked at, automating systems and processes with using technology, everyone was like afraid. Like, no, we can't do that. We have our method. We know what we're doing. The moment they transition, it's like, we can't imagine how we did things before this. Completely changed the game. When shopping on television, ABC and all of that came about, I was like, we need to take our product lines and go direct to consumer and beyond B2B, go to B2C or B2C. Yeah. And the idea was like, no, we can't do that. So I was always ahead of my time. I was always thinking, we had a chain of retail stores, and I was like, we need to combine all of these and create the concept of Staples. This is before Staples existed. and almost got there, but people were like, no, this is too scary, too risky. And then of course, years later, the model gets proved out. So then I decided to experiment on my own. We did that in hospitality and food and beverage, and kind of the franchise business model, and the commercial real estate, innovation in real estate. So co-founded NextBridge, which was a hybrid model of private equity meets VC model applied to interesting innovations in real estate kind of thinking. Did that for about 10 years. Then started a incubator co-working space competing against WeWork in their first 3 years of operations. We were profitable. We had about 100 startup companies in our location in New Jersey, which people are like, you're in this county in New Jersey, like, where are you on the map? We had companies from Silicon Valley in our space. We had entrepreneurs from the tri-state area. We also had spin-outs from companies like, the Star Wars technology company that did a spin-out and was in our space. And so we had these amazing companies kind of like undercover in stealth mode, incubating out of our space. And we started a meetup group that got to like 8,000 plus community. We held somewhere between 50 to 70 community events and really helped build an ecosystem for that in the state of New Jersey, in the tri-state area. After that, started thinking, how do I impact the space of education?
Mm-hmm.
So about 6 years ago, and wanted to transition yet to another challenge. So I said, okay, I've always wanted to see what it's like to be in the academia space now as an educator. So joined Rutgers University, and I get to have some of the most fun. We're a 250 plus year academic institution. It's a public research university with 70,000 plus students. I get to teach across. I'm headquartered at the business school, but my students come from all the different disciplines, which I love. Most faculty members never get to do that. They're pigeonholed in one school, one department, one course series, and I get to break open those windows and doors and basically break down the silos to rethink what education can look like across disciplines. So my students come from the business school, law school, engineering school, computer science, School of Arts and Science, and even the School of Mason Grove School of the Arts, pharmacy, medicine, pre-law. So it's fantastic. I have doctors in my classes, lawyers, CPAs, MBAs, executive MBAs, all the way down to undergrads. And it's just a lot of fun.
So tell us about what are these students looking for that they're not getting from their own curriculum, right? If I'm studying biology, or I'm a doctor, or I'm studying finance, why am I coming to your innovation lab or your center of learning? What is it that's so unique about that culture mix, really, at the end of the day?
Basically, I'm on a mission to disrupt the educational space and to innovate in the educational space. And that's been my mission. And I teach across not only Rutgers University, but also collaborate with a number of other universities in the US and globally, including KAIST University in South Korea, DICE University and Kampat University in India, Mumbai and Gujarat, as well as universities in Singapore. Mm-hmm. And now I'm collaborating with universities in Athens, Greece, and Toronto. And so it's a lot of new ways of thinking of education. So here's what students are not getting, and this is probably at a global and national level. They're not getting interdisciplinary perspectives. They're siloed very early in their school, in their major or minor, and they're not seeing what's happening in adjacencies, and they're not building their peripheral vision. That's number one. Number two, so much of traditional education is textbook learning. Mm-hmm. And today, with the pace of change, I call it the fourth order of magnitude of change, or the fourth power of change. First, there was change and a lot of fear with change. Then there was accelerated change. Think about the fourth industrial revolution, and from the early 90s to now, how it's accelerated. All the curves that you look at are these exponential curves. Then came exponential change, and now there's disruptive change. In the last 12 months, if anything, have shown us that kind of 100-year black swan event.
Right.
And so they're not getting exposed to experiential learning, and it's mostly theoretical book learning. So that's the second component. And the third is they're not being taught about how to leverage emerging technologies and innovations across disciplines in a collaborative way, and without being siloed within your university. So how can students connect with students of other universities? I'll give you a quick example. One of my courses, called the ICE course, Innovation, Creativity, and Entrepreneurship, is open to students of all majors and backgrounds. But recently it was accepted into the Big Ten Alliance, which means I had students from the Big Ten network, Indiana University, Drexel, Penn State, all these different universities taking my courses. And then I opened it up even more. So I had students from almost all the Ivy League schools, plus Stanford and MIT and Caltech, coming and visiting inside our course and connecting and expanding networks, sharing ideas, proliferating different ideas for concepts. So that typically doesn't happen in an traditional academic environment.
Okay, so then in the last year, you've been professor there for a while. The learning environment has changed. So how do you motivate or get these guys to experiment in real time? Speaking of exponential, they immediately had to figure out how to do everything online, and most people are still not comfortable in that same scenario. So what are they doing now in the classroom environment that they can apply themselves during and after?
Yeah, I love that question. In my opinion, I think the challenge and the problem is not the students, it's the teachers. Not in terms of a negative problem, but in terms of the number one thing we can teach students is how to adapt in any situation to be able to come up and rise and build these quality sets of resiliency and grit and innovative creative thinking. And I feel that students can adapt pretty quickly, especially because they're natives, digital natives. So for them, it's intuitive. They understand technology, except if they don't have access. That's a whole different problem in terms of diversity, inclusion, and equity. If they don't have access because they don't have bandwidth, they don't have equipment, that's a different problem, and that can be solved through partnerships, corporate partnerships, government partnerships, et cetera. But what I found is that the academics that were so comfortable, they fell into this notion of status quo, just like businesses and corporations.
Yeah.
And they get comfortable. And now they have to become the student. And it's not easy because many of them have not become students in a long period of time.
Right.
Some that are phenomenal students and they always learn, like in Amazon, the saying of every day is day one.
Right.
There's some faculty and teachers that have done a phenomenal job in taking that leadership role, and even administrators that have taken that leadership role. And it shows who's the leader and who's the follower. It becomes very evident during these kinds of special situations. But there's so much great technology out there. I mean, you think about web platforms, everything from like what happened to Zoom and WebEx and Teams or Google Hangouts or Blue Jeans, even companies getting built by fellow colleagues of ours from Thai that have sold companies like Blue Jeans for, $500 million to companies like Verizon. I mean, just great case studies of what can be built. Look at Slack with their IPO being sold to Salesforce for, valuation of more than $20 billion. Platforms that allow people to connect and engage. And now there's so many, probably 100 other technology companies that are doing add-ons and adjacencies and extensions to these technology platforms, including the platform we're on right now, right?
Yeah. This is StreamYard. It was acquired by Hopin.
There you go. And I've used Hopin. I've used a number of other platforms like that. So much becomes possible now. But here's one of the challenges: assessments. How do you test your students in a way where they cannot or will not cheat? How do you identify authentication, that the person taking the assessment is the person who should be taking the assessment, and without additional resources of someone else in the room or on their phone, or chatting through group chats or et cetera. So I'm actually on the board of some great technology companies that are innovating in the space. One is called Gabi, Global Artificial Business Intelligence. That's the IoT platform for information control. And that's really innovating some fantastic stuff. Another one called Examed or Examd, where they are creating a platform for bringing integrity to assessments in the digital world, both live or digital platforms. So there's challenges, but I think with every challenge, there's at least 10 opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads me to the next piece. What's the future now? We're about to open the economy back up. There's been a lot of questions about physical, campuses, offices, a meeting in place. How are you going to set it up going forward, right? You could teach 1 million people from just virtually online, but you're limited by physical real estate, to a couple hundred, a couple thousand. So what's the future of either Rutgers or your professorship, like in that teaching environment? What's going to change now for the next few years?
Yeah, I believe the best model for education going forward into the future for the next 10 plus years is a hybrid model that integrates digital learning or online learning that includes both synchronous and asynchronous models as well, and cross-platform learning with different LMS learning management systems, integrating the video and the technologies and assessments and all of that, content delivery, for example. But a combination of that plus the real in-person engaging opportunities, so campuses. However, I think, and very few universities in the world are doing this today.
Yeah.
I think there is a huge opportunity to think beyond the four walls of traditional education. Here are some questions. Why does a college admission have to be only with one degree producing institution? Why do we have 4,000 plus colleges in the US, many of which are going to go out of business due to the pandemic and already have? That's just going to continue to accelerate.
Yeah.
But why do, let's say, 4,000 in the US and tens of thousands globally of higher, academic institutions? Why is there just a one institution application or affiliation for degree and for the experience? Why not completely disrupt that space and say, hey, when you apply and get admitted into 2, 3, or 4 different university networks. And then you take your 4-year degree or college, and maybe it's 3 years for some, maybe it's 5 years for some. However, you co-create the experience based on what you want or need, because there's no one size fits all anymore. It needs to be just like medicine and everything else. The experience needs to be customized, personalized for the greatest impact and based on best practices. So why not pick 3 or 4 universities?
Yeah.
Instead of doing summer study abroads, you do first year at one institution, combination hybrid of live and online. Second year, go to a different city, a different state, a different country for the whole year. And you'd go there and it's with a participating partner of an academic institution. Third year, you get to pick a third or a fourth. And you don't have to go through all 3 or 4. You can choose 1 or 2 or up to maximizing it. But they collaboratively share resources, best practices, best faculty. Why is it that if you get stuck with a calculus professor that doesn't care to teach, just wants to publish and do research, comes into the classroom, maybe has 100 students, never looks at the student, fills up 20 boards, whiteboards, but doesn't get to know a single student by name or what their passions and interests are, help them with their career trajectory, help them develop as an individual, right? Be a thought leader in that space or discipline. Bring a subject to life. The number one complaint from students are that sometimes they don't understand the professor if they have a heavy accent or have certain limitations. Other times they feel that there was nothing inspirational about the subject and they tuned out. They even stopped showing up to go to class. That's unacceptable. We need to inspire students to want to learn and become these agile learners. And so there are different ways to do this where you can take the best professor for a course. Doesn't matter which institution you're physically in. Let's take this case study of 100 years, this Black Swan event, take it 10 years forward. I think there are these great opportunities. And then corporations should be involved in saying these are the skills we need our employees to know to be competitive. And so colleges need to partner with them, not kind of hide in the ivy towers or silos of education, but we need to have strong partnerships with industry and executives globally and have these perspectives permeate in education.
I think it's a wonderful idea. It's a more unique. I haven't heard that. I think that's important to do that, hop, skip, and jump in different learning environments. and extract as much as you can. Once again, if you have any questions, we got about a dozen people still watching live, so feel free to just bring them in. We got a couple comments. But, one question I always wrap up with is what's your favorite book? But I'm going to change that for you because you talked about breaking up the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a student, I would always have to buy X amount of books. And I sold most of them except my economics ones and accounting ones, right? Because the other ones have no interest. You don't use them. Most of the pages, you never read them. And
most books become obsolete within months of being on the printing press.
Yeah, and I think every professor knows that, and students definitely know that. So what do you recommend, either your students or anybody that's watching, when you're in your classroom and they have to buy these 3 books because they're mandatory or required, what's the one that's the optional, necessary to succeed in life, career, and business?
Look, some textbooks are necessary because it's a good framework to learn, but so many textbooks do not have to be as expensive as they are. They don't have to have 600 pages. Students do not read that in 14 weeks. And so I think even the textbook industry needs to be completely disrupted. I'm going to run and grab this book on my shelf right now. Hang on.
Once again, if you have any questions, if you have a favorite book, let us know in the comments what you're reading, what Mukesh is about to give us as well. I see Steve Jobs in the back.
Yeah, so I have 250 books on my favorite book list, and I tell my students that they have to read at least 10 to 50 books per year for the rest of their lives.
Oh, wow.
And they start to do that. One of my favorite books is this, Disrupting Class, by Professor Clay Christensen out of Harvard. He wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, and how he says how disruptive innovation will change the way the world learns. It's already happening.
Yeah.
Another great book is Think Bigger. Because I think most students, most people, most executives don't think bigger. There's some phenomenal books. I mean, I love The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Yeah.
Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz, VC firm. Love the originals by Adam Grant at Penn, at Wharton.
Mm-hmm.
The book Mindset from Dr. Carol Dweck and Grit from Angela Duckworth.
That's a good one.
Just fantastic books. There's so many great books out there. Winning by Jack Welch.
Which one?
Winning by Jack Welch.
He's written like 8 of them. The Ben Horowitz is definitely one of the most recommended and the most read by entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. It's one of my favorites.
My favorite book is Shoe Dog by the founder and CEO of Nike.
It's very popular. I'd be surprised if they don't make a movie on that book because it's very well written.
I've already started writing the screenplay.
Actually, let's end on that. Tell us about that. It's a different venture. It's very different from what you're doing. Actually, before we do that, Raj just signed in. I actually think he's a Thai member as well. So I don't know if you met Raj before. He's asking, how are you talking to students when you were a venture capitalist?
How was I talking to students?
Yeah, since you're a venture capitalist, how are you talking to the students about investing in venture?
Oh, so doesn't matter what course I teach. I've designed 12 new courses at the university. I always do one module on investing in yourself, investing your financial capital, investing your network capital, and fundamentals of investing, and then also introduce to them the world of risk taking and how to rethink risk for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Because students typically don't take enough risk in their lives early on. And so we talk about that. I introduce them to the world of private equity and VCs. I bring in VCs as guest speakers into my class.
Very cool.
PE executives. I get them internships into VC firms. Awesome. I introduce them to portfolio companies of VC firms so they can see it from both sides of the perspective. As an investor and also as an investee as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's the experience that people want to see from the buyer, the seller, the financier, to get a really good understanding of what's going on in the ecosystem, not just as an investor or just as an entrepreneur. There are multiple factors. So let's actually, if anybody else has any more questions, feel free to chime in, comment below. But Mukesh, let's get back to your creative venture, filmmaking. How did you get into that area of finance? It's very unique. It's very different, and digital media is very hot.
Yeah, no, I've loved films ever since I can remember. I think one of the first movies I remember growing up seeing with my family, one Bollywood movie was Sholay,
Yeah.
and a Hollywood movie would have been maybe Ghostbusters or Karate Kid, or
Yep.
the original ones,
Yep.
and a whole bunch. Since then, I've been hooked, and since the days of um, like when the VCRs first came out, I was already starting to cut and edit and start producing films. I started film clubs in college. My roommate and I actually wrote a treatment for a pilot program, for a pilot for television called Under One Roof, which we produced and directed and with a team. And then I've worked with filmmakers both as an attorney representing filmmakers and artists and actors and musicians, singer-songwriters, but also as an investor. My roommate directed a film called American Desi,
Hmm.
which had Kal Penn and Deep Kader and a number of other actors before they became big. And then I worked with director producer Tilak Malik with Apple Film Productions, a film called um, originally called Coming to America, and then the name was changed. And just phenomenal people in the industry, and I love media tech.
Hmm.
So it's a space. I just invested in a company called LiveDemi
Okay.
with Silicon Valley tech entrepreneurs and some IIT alums in India who are building this phenomenal educational tech platform to disrupt and change music education globally with
Got it.
celebrity musicians teaching music to anyone in the world.
The business of music, film, entertainment is amazing. Obviously, today with YouTube, royalty rights, it's very hot. Actually, I'll mention two things on that note. One, Kal Penn's from New Jersey. He just released his book today, You Can't Be Serious, about being a stoner and working with the president.
Yeah,
So it's very amazing to see that, Jersey born, Jersey bred. And what's the second piece? Oh, Vidya is a big notable music rights company in New Jersey. So,
right. So I'm advising the founder and CEO of Vidya right now
oh, okay.
on some interesting ideas and opportunities. So that's fantastic. And then entertainment is not only films and music; it's also sports. So I'm
Yeah.
working with a great team on a tech startup called WagerWire. It's our current working title, but it's a tech platform for fantasy sports meets sports betting. So a very fascinating space, and that company is going to launch soon as well.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, that's a big environment. Obviously, Atlantic City, sports betting, all that stuff is going to take off. So it's very hot. It's very promising. So thank you everybody for the questions. If you want to reach out, you can reach out to Mukesh. You can check out his website. It's on below, ProfessorMukeshPatel.com or ProfMukeshPatel.com.
ProfMukeshPatel.com. Connect anytime.
Yeah, connect anytime. He's accessible. You can find him on LinkedIn. If you want to tag in Mukesh, any way they can reach you or how they should follow up if they have any questions.
Yep. All my contact information is on there. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or send me a message through the contact me page on the website. Happy to connect, especially if you have big, disruptive, innovative ideas, or you want big, disruptive, innovative ideas. One way or the other, open to collaboration.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Mukesh. This was great. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Until next time, this is the Financier signing off.
Take care of you, Jared. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.